What would you do if you discovered the person sleeping next to you for 10 years was living an entirely different life? Not just hiding a small secret or a white lie, but maintaining a complete second existence with another family, other children, and a web of deception so intricate it would make your head spin. Have you ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right in your relationship? That nagging suspicion when your partner's story doesn't quite add up? When receipts don't match their explanations? Or when their phone buzzes at midnight with messages they quickly dismiss? Have you ever ignored those red flags because confronting the truth felt too terrifying? Welcome to True Crime Dossier. I'm your host, and today we're examining a case that will forever change how you view trust in marriage. This isn't just another story of infidelity, this is about the devastating consequences when deception reaches its breaking point. Tonight, we're diving into a case that will make you question everything you think you know about trust, marriage, and the people closest to us. In the heart of Texas, where community bonds run deep and neighbors trust one another, a devoted schoolteacher named Lila Garza was about to discover that her husband Marcus had been living a double life for nearly a decade. But this isn't just about cheating. This is about the moment when confronting the truth becomes a matter of life and death. Lila was everything you'd want in a neighbor. Kind, gentle, the type of teacher who remembered every student's birthday. Marcus appeared to be the perfect husband, hard-working contractor, respected in the community, charming smile that could light up any room. Together, they seemed to embody the American dream in small-town Texas. Yet behind closed doors, Marcus was meticulously maintaining relationships with another woman and her 2 children. A secret family that required constant lies, hidden bank accounts, and a level of deception that would ultimately demand the highest price imaginable. By the end of this story, you'll understand the warning signs that could save your life. You'll learn how financial inconsistencies can reveal hidden truths, why trust must be earned continuously, and most importantly, how to recognize when someone you love might be capable of unthinkable violence. This case changed an entire community's understanding of domestic relationships and taught law enforcement crucial lessons about investigating hidden lives. The investigation, led by Detective Raul Mendoza, would expose a decade of carefully constructed lies and reveal how quickly love can transform into something deadly. If stories like this fascinate you and you want to learn the psychological patterns that can help protect you and your loved ones, hit that subscribe button. We examine cases that teach us about human nature and provide real-world lessons that could save lives. But first, let me take you back to that humid August evening when Lila Garza made a discovery that would seal her fate. In the sun-baked landscape of small-town Texas, where pickup trucks line Main Street and Friday night football games bring entire communities together, Lila Garza represented everything good about American values. At 34, she had devoted 12 years of her life to shaping young minds at Riverside Elementary School, where her classroom walls were covered with thank you cards from former students and their grateful parents. How well do you really know your partner after 10 years together? When you share a mortgage, joint bank accounts, and countless intimate moments, do you truly believe you know every facet of their character? Lila believed she did. Every morning, she would wake to the sound of Marcus starting his pickup truck at 6:30 a.m. sharp, coffee already brewing in their modest 3-bedroom home on Maple Street. Their routine was comforting in its predictability. He'd leave for construction sites across the county while she prepared lessons for her 3rd-grade students. Marcus Holloway was the kind of man other husbands aspired to become. At 36, his construction business had earned him respect throughout the region. Clients recommended him not just for his craftsmanship, but for his reliability. He showed up when promised, finished projects on schedule, and charged fair prices. His handshake meant more than most written contracts. At community barbecues, Marcus was the guy everyone wanted to talk to. He could discuss everything from football statistics to home renovation tips, always with that easy smile that made people feel comfortable. Women would joke to Lila about how lucky she was, while their husbands secretly envied Marcus's ability to balance work success with apparent marital bliss. For 10 years, their marriage seemed to embody stability. They owned their home outright, a testament to Marcus's business acumen and Lila's careful budgeting. They attended church regularly, hosted annual Christmas parties, and never missed supporting their neighbors during difficult times. When the Henderson family lost their farm to drought, Marcus organized volunteers to help with repairs while Lila coordinated meal deliveries. But here's what makes this case so chilling. The people who appear most trustworthy often hide the darkest secrets. Lila's colleagues at school described her as the teacher who stayed late to help struggling students, who used her own money to buy supplies for children whose families couldn't afford them. She possessed that rare combination of firmness and compassion that made parents specifically request their children be placed in her classroom. Yet beneath this foundation of community respect and marital contentment, hairline cracks were beginning to form. Marcus's explanations for working late became more frequent. His phone calls, once taken openly in their living room, migrated to hushed conversations in the garage or during walks around the block. When Lila asked about these changes, Marcus had reasonable answers. The construction business was expanding. New clients required more travel time. Economic pressures meant longer hours to secure their financial future. His explanations always made perfect sense in isolation. Think about your own relationship for a moment. How many small inconsistencies do you rationalize away because the alternative, questioning your partner's honesty, feels too devastating to consider? The subtle shifts in Marcus's behavior weren't dramatic enough to trigger alarm bells. A forgotten anniversary dinner reservation here, a business trip that extended unexpectedly there. Mixed in with genuine work pressures and the normal evolution of a decade-long marriage, these changes seemed natural rather than calculated. Lila's trusting nature became both her greatest strength and most dangerous vulnerability. In her classroom, she taught children to see the good in others, to give people second chances, to communicate when problems arose. These same qualities that made her an exceptional teacher prevented her from recognizing the systematic deception taking place in her own home. Their neighbors saw them as relationship goals. Church friends envied their apparent harmony. Family members pointed to Marcus and Lila as proof that true love could flourish in an age of widespread divorce. None of them realized they were witnessing the performance of a lifetime, a decade-long deception that required Marcus to maintain two completely separate identities, two sets of relationships, and two versions of the truth that could never coexist once exposed. Have you ever noticed something that felt wrong but convinced yourself you were overreacting? That's exactly where Lila found herself during the 7th year of her marriage, when small inconsistencies began accumulating like storm clouds on a clear horizon. It started with phone calls. Marcus had always been accessible, the kind of contractor who answered his phone even during dinner because clients appreciated his responsiveness. But now, when his phone rang during their evening conversations, he would glance at the screen and let it go to voicemail. "Just work," he'd explain, setting the device face down on the coffee table. "I'll handle it tomorrow." When Lila suggested he should take important calls, after all, construction emergencies could mean the difference between a successful project and costly delays, Marcus would dismiss her concern. "Nothing that can't wait until morning, babe." But here's the first critical warning sign. When someone's communication patterns change dramatically without reasonable explanation, pay attention. The late-night conversations started around the same time. Lila would wake at 2 a.m. to find Marcus's side of the bed empty, hushed voices drifting from the kitchen or back porch. When she'd appear in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, Marcus would quickly end the call. "Sorry, honey. Client having a panic attack about tomorrow's concrete pour." You know how these first-time homeowners get. Lila's teaching experience had taught her to recognize when students were being deceptive, but love creates blind spots that professional training can't overcome. When someone you trust offers explanations, your brain actively works to make those explanations fit reality, even when logic suggests otherwise. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, how many times have you accepted explanations that didn't quite make sense because questioning them felt more uncomfortable than believing them? The financial irregularities emerged gradually. Lila handled their household budget with the same meticulous attention she brought to lesson planning. Every expense was categorized, every receipt filed. So when credit card statements showed charges from restaurants she'd never visited and gas stations in towns she'd never heard of, the discrepancy stood out immediately. "Oh, that Mexican place?" Marcus would say when she asked about a $40 dinner charge from Rico's Cantina, 90 miles away. "Grabbed lunch with the Henderson Project team. We were looking at similar layouts in Brownsville." The explanations always sounded plausible. Construction work did require travel. Client meetings happened at unusual hours. Business dinners were part of relationship building. Marcus delivered each answer with the same confident tone he used when explaining home repair projects to nervous homeowners. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Weekend emergency calls that took him away for hours. business trips that extended unexpectedly. Most tellingly, an emotional distance that crept into their intimate moments, like Marcus was physically present but mentally elsewhere. Here's what relationship experts want you to understand. Deception requires enormous mental energy. The person lying to you is constantly managing multiple versions of reality, which creates behavioral changes you can learn to recognize. Lila began documenting inconsistencies without even realizing it. Teachers develop habits of record keeping, and she found herself noting dates when Marcus claimed to be at specific job sites, only to later discover those projects had been completed weeks earlier. She'd remember him mentioning client names that never appeared in subsequent conversations about work. The psychology of denial is powerful, especially in relationships where trust has been the foundation for years. Lila's mind created increasingly elaborate justifications for each discrepancy. Maybe she'd misremembered the project timeline. Perhaps Marcus was protecting client confidentiality by being vague about details. Her teaching schedule was demanding. Maybe she simply wasn't paying close enough attention to his work commitments. But here's the life lesson that could save your relationship or even your life. When multiple small red flags appear together, they form a pattern that deserves serious investigation. The breaking point began with a misdirected package. On a humid Tuesday afternoon in late August, the mailman delivered an envelope addressed to Vanessa Ruiz at their Maple Street address. Inside were children's school registration forms, a pediatrician's appointment card, and a handwritten note discussing next week's family dinner. Lila stared at the documents, her heart rate accelerating as she processed the implications. The pediatrician's office was local. The school registration was for Riverside Elementary, her school. Someone named Vanessa Ruiz believed she lived at Lila's address and had children who would be attending Lila's workplace. Drop a comment if you've ever ignored red flags in a relationship. You're not alone in this. Recognition is the first step toward protection. Standing in her kitchen, holding evidence of another woman's life, Lila finally understood that her instincts had been correct all along. The late-night calls, the unexplained expenses, the emotional distance. They weren't random inconsistencies requiring creative explanations. They were pieces of a larger truth that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her marriage. The misdirected package sat on Lila's kitchen counter like a loaded weapon she was afraid to touch. Vanessa Ruiz. The name echoed in her mind as she stared at the children's school forms, each document raising questions that demanded answers she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. But Lila Garza hadn't become a successful teacher by avoiding difficult truths. She'd built her career on facing problems head-on, whether dealing with struggling students or challenging parents. Now she applied that same methodical approach to her own life. Her investigation began in the most mundane place possible, their shared filing cabinet in the home office. For 10 years, she trusted Marcus to handle their business finances while she managed household expenses. That division of labor, once a symbol of partnership, now felt like a critical oversight. The first irregularity appeared in their joint savings account statements. Monthly transfers of $1,200 to an account number she didn't recognize. When she cross-referenced the dates with her calendar, a chilling pattern emerged. These transfers occurred every month like clockwork for the past 8 years. Can you comprehend maintaining a lie for 8 years? The mental energy required to keep track of every story, every excuse, every fabricated detail? Armed with account numbers and determined to find answers, Lila drove to their bank the next morning. The young teller, Sarah Martinez, had processed their transactions for years and knew Lila by name. Mrs. Garza, how can I help you today? I need to understand where these monthly transfers are going, Lila said, sliding the statements across the counter. My husband handles our business accounts, but I'm trying to reconcile our records. Sarah's expression grew cautious as she reviewed the documents. I can see the transfers, but the receiving account isn't with our bank. You'd need to contact the receiving institution directly. The receiving bank was 30 miles away in Cedar Springs, a town Lila had visited exactly once in 10 years of marriage. She made the drive that afternoon, her hands gripping the steering wheel as questions multiplied in her mind. At Cedar Springs First National, a manager named Tom Wilson agreed to meet with her. When Lila explained she was trying to trace transfers from her joint account, his response stopped her cold. Ma'am, I can confirm that money has been regularly deposited into an account under the name Marcus Holloway and Vanessa Ruiz. But I can't provide details without proper authorization from both account holders. The confirmation hit Lila like a physical blow. Marcus Holloway and Vanessa Ruiz, joint account holders. For 8 years, her husband had been sharing finances with another woman while maintaining the facade of their struggling to save household budget. Her next stop was Riverside Elementary School, where she'd worked for 12 years. If Vanessa Ruiz was registering children at Lila's own school, someone in the office would have records. Principal Janet Miller welcomed Lila into her office, surprised by the unexpected visit during summer break. "Lila, what brings you in today? I need to ask about student registrations. Has anyone named Vanessa Ruiz tried to enroll children for the fall semester?" Janet's face brightened with recognition. "Oh yes. She came in 2 weeks ago with her kids, Mateo and Sofia. Lovely family. She mentioned her husband works construction around here. Small world, right?" Small world indeed. Lila's vision blurred as the pieces clicked into place. Did she mention her husband's name? Marcus something, I think? She was so excited about the kids starting school here. Said they'd finally found a permanent home in the community. Permanent home. Community. The words Lila had used to describe her own life with Marcus were being applied to another woman's relationship with the same man. At what point does denial become impossible? When does the evidence become so overwhelming that your mind can no longer create alternative explanations? That evening, while Marcus attended what he claimed was a city planning meeting, Lila conducted her most thorough search yet. In their bedroom closet, behind boxes of Christmas decorations, she found a small duffel bag she'd never seen before. Inside were photographs. Marcus with a beautiful Hispanic woman and 2 young children. Marcus pushing a little girl on a swing set. Marcus teaching a boy to throw a baseball. Family photos spanning years. Candid moments of genuine happiness that looked exactly like the photos displayed in their own living room. But these weren't their photos. This wasn't their family. This was evidence of an entirely separate life Marcus had been living while coming home to Lila each night. The final piece of evidence was a birthday card dated 3 months earlier. "Happy 35th birthday to the best daddy in the world," written in a child's careful handwriting. Below it, an adult's signature, "Love always, Vanessa." Lila sat on their bedroom floor, surrounded by proof of Marcus's double life, and felt something inside her break. Not just her heart, though that was shattered beyond repair, but her fundamental understanding of reality itself. For nearly a decade, every conversation, every shared meal, every intimate moment had been contaminated by this massive deception. While she'd been planning their future, Marcus had been living a completely different present with another family. The man she'd loved and trusted had been performing a role in their marriage while his authentic self existed elsewhere, with people who knew nothing about Lila's existence. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, but the questions it raised were even more terrifying. What else didn't she know? And what would Marcus do when confronted with irrefutable evidence of his lies? For 3 sleepless weeks, Lila carried the weight of her discovery like a stone in her chest. She moved through her daily routines, teaching lessons, grading papers, preparing dinner, while her mind raced with questions about how to handle the devastating truth she'd uncovered. How do you confront someone about a lie so massive it redefines your entire relationship? How do you approach a conversation that will either save your marriage or destroy it completely? Every interaction with Marcus felt surreal. When he kissed her goodbye each morning, she wondered if he was thinking about Vanessa. When he complained about work stress over dinner, she questioned whether his real concern was managing 2 families without either discovering the other. The man sitting across from her at their kitchen table had become a stranger wearing her husband's face. Lila's teacher training had taught her the importance of preparation before difficult conversations. She gathered every piece of evidence, bank statements, photographs, the birthday card, and organized them in a manila folder. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would present the facts calmly and give Marcus an opportunity to explain. But no amount of preparation could have readied her for what actually happened on that cold November evening. Marcus arrived home later than usual, claiming a client meeting had run long. He seemed tired, distracted, checking his phone more frequently than normal. When Lila suggested they talk in the living room after dinner, something in her tone made him pause. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, but his eyes were already scanning her face for clues about what was coming. Lila set the manila folder on their coffee table, her hands trembling slightly. "I need to ask you about some things I've found. I'm hoping you can help me understand." The change in Marcus was immediate. His posture stiffened, his expression shifting from casual concern to guarded alertness. "What kind of things?" She opened the folder and removed the bank statements first, placing them where he could see the highlighted transfers. "These monthly payments to an account in Cedar Springs. Can you explain what they're for?" Marcus glanced at the papers, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Business expenses. I told you I was expanding into that area. The account is joint, Lila said quietly. Under your name and someone named Vanessa Ruiz. The silence that followed felt electric. Marcus's eyes darted between the documents and Lila's face, his mind clearly calculating how much she knew versus how much he could still deny. Who told you that? His voice had changed, becoming sharper, more defensive. I went to the bank myself. Lila pulled out the children's school registration forms. These were delivered to our house by mistake. Vanessa Ruiz is enrolling kids at my school. Kids who think you're their father. This is the moment when a decade of lies began collapsing under their own weight. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window before turning back to face her. You don't understand the situation, Lila. It's complicated. Then help me understand. Her voice remained steady despite the chaos in her chest. Help me understand how you've been supporting another family for 8 years while telling me we couldn't afford to start our own. That's not... Marcus stopped himself, running his hands through his hair. You're making this sound like something it's not. Lila reached for the photographs, placing them on the table one by one. Marcus at birthday parties. Marcus teaching a boy to ride a bicycle. Marcus kissing Vanessa under Christmas lights. What exactly am I making this sound like? She asked. The photographs seemed to break something in Marcus's carefully constructed composure. His pacing became more agitated, his breathing more labored. The charm and easy confidence that had defined him for 10 years began cracking like paint on weathered wood. You went through my personal things? His voice rose, taking on an accusatory tone that caught Lila off guard. You violated my privacy? Your privacy? The absurdity of his outrage cut through her emotional numbness. Marcus, you have children with another woman. You've been lying to me every single day for nearly a decade. It's not that simple, he shouted, his fists clenching at his sides. You don't know what it's been like, trying to handle everything, trying to keep everyone happy. The revelation was stunning, not just his admission, but his apparent belief that he was the victim in this situation. Marcus had convinced himself that maintaining 2 families was a burden he'd nobly shouldered rather than a betrayal he'd chosen to commit. Everyone happy? Lila's voice finally cracked. I'm not happy, Marcus. I've been living a lie. What did you expect me to do? His words came faster now, more desperate. Just abandon them? Leave Vanessa and the kids with nothing? Here's where the psychology becomes crucial. When someone's carefully constructed false reality is exposed, they often react with rage rather than remorse. Marcus's anger wasn't directed at his own actions. It was focused on Lila for discovering them. In his mind, the problem wasn't his deception but her investigation. The threat wasn't his betrayal but her knowledge of it. You should have trusted me, he continued, his voice growing more menacing. This wouldn't have been a problem if you just trusted me to handle it. Lila stared at the man she'd loved for 10 years, finally understanding that she'd never actually known him at all. The Marcus who brought her flowers on anniversaries, who fixed their leaky faucets and charmed their neighbors, was just one version of himself. A performance he'd maintained while his authentic self existed elsewhere. I did trust you, she whispered. For 10 years I trusted you completely. That's when Marcus looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the love she'd believed they shared. The conversation had reached the point where words could no longer resolve what had been broken. And Marcus, faced with the complete collapse of his double life, was about to make a choice that would destroy any possibility of redemption. Here's what domestic violence experts want everyone to understand. The most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is when the abuser's control is threatened. Marcus stood in their living room, surrounded by evidence of his decade-long deception, watching his carefully constructed world collapse. But instead of accepting responsibility or showing remorse, his mind focused on a single terrifying thought. Lila now possessed the power to destroy both of his lives. You can't tell anyone about this, he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. Promise me you won't say anything until we figure this out together. Lila looked at him with a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief. Marcus, I can't pretend I don't know. These are children we're talking about. Vanessa deserves to know the truth about who you really are. No. His response was immediate and forceful. You don't understand what that would do. It would ruin everything. Everything is already ruined, Lila replied quietly. Our marriage, our trust, it's all been built on lies. The conversation had moved beyond reconciliation. Lila wasn't just rejecting his explanations. She was rejecting his authority to control the narrative. For a man who had spent years managing multiple realities through manipulation and charm, her refusal to be controlled represented an existential threat. Marcus's behavior shifted dramatically. The pleading tone vanished, replaced by cold calculation. He began pacing more aggressively, his movements becoming erratic and unpredictable. "After everything I've done for you," he said, his voice growing louder, "I worked myself to death to give you this house, this life. And this is how you repay me." This is a critical warning sign that anyone in a relationship should recognize, when someone frames your discovery of their betrayal as an attack on them. Lila remained seated, surrounded by the photographs and documents that proved his infidelity. "Marcus, please. Let's just figure out how to handle this responsibly. Maybe counseling could help us." "Counseling?" His laugh was harsh and bitter. "You think some therapist is going to fix this? You think you can just destroy two families and then talk it through?" The accusation was stunning in its reversal of responsibility. Marcus had created this situation through years of deliberate deception, but in his mind, Lila's discovery of the truth made her the aggressor. When she stood to face him, something in Marcus's expression changed completely. The man she'd loved for 10 years disappeared, replaced by someone she didn't recognize, someone whose eyes held no warmth, no familiarity, no trace of the connection they'd once shared. "You're not going to ruin this," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. The attack happened with shocking speed. Marcus lunged toward the workbench in their garage entryway, grabbing a heavy wrench he'd left there after weekend repairs. The tool that had once represented his skill and reliability became an instrument of unspeakable violence. Lila had no time to defend herself, no opportunity to escape. The man who had promised to love and protect her brought the wrench down with devastating force. The impact was immediate and final. Lila Garza, beloved teacher and devoted wife, died in her own living room at the hands of the person she trusted most in the world. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood over Lila's lifeless body, the wrench still in his trembling hands, finally comprehending the irreversible nature of his actions. The rage that had consumed him moments earlier evaporated, leaving behind only horror and the crushing realization of what he'd done. There would be no explaining this away. No charm or manipulation could resurrect the woman lying motionless on their hardwood floor. No carefully crafted story could undo the brutal reality of murder. This tragedy illustrates a devastating truth. Domestic violence often escalates when the abuser's control is challenged. Recognition of warning signs, possessiveness, extreme anger when questioned, attempts to isolate victims, can literally save lives. In less than 2 minutes, a confrontation about infidelity had transformed into a murder that would destroy multiple families and shatter an entire community's sense of safety. Marcus Holloway had chosen violence over accountability, and that choice would define the final chapter of his story. The 911 call came at 11:47 p.m. on a cold November night. Marcus Holloway's voice was barely coherent as he reported finding his wife unconscious in their living room. The dispatcher immediately sent paramedics and patrol officers to the Maple Street residence, but within minutes of arrival, it became clear this was no medical emergency. Lila Garza was dead and the scene suggested violence. Detective Raul Mendoza received the call at his home just after midnight. A 20-year law enforcement professional, Mendoza had investigated dozens of domestic homicides, but this case would challenge every aspect of his investigative skills. The first rule in any suspicious death is to treat the scene as a homicide until proven otherwise, Mendoza later explained to reporters. But the husband's story had inconsistencies from the very beginning. Marcus claimed he'd returned from a business dinner to find Lila collapsed in their living room. He insisted he'd immediately called for help without moving anything. But crime scene technicians quickly identified problems with his account. Here's what modern forensic science can reveal. Blood spatter patterns tell a story that witnesses often try to hide. The evidence painted a clear picture of violence. Lila's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, not a medical emergency. Blood evidence indicated she'd been struck while standing near their coffee table, with no signs of defensive wounds suggesting she'd been caught completely off guard. More importantly, the positioning of furniture and scattered documents suggested a confrontation had taken place before the attack. Bank statements and photographs were spread across the living room, evidence that someone had been presenting information to another person. Mendoza's team secured Marcus's cell phone, computer, and financial records within hours of the discovery. Modern investigations rely heavily on digital forensics, and this case would prove no exception. People think they can delete text messages or clear their browser history, Mendoza noted. But digital evidence is remarkably persistent. We can reconstruct communications going back years. The digital trail revealed the full scope of Marcus's double life. Text messages between Marcus and Vanessa Ruiz showed intimate conversations spanning nearly a decade. Financial records confirmed regular support payments. Most damning were recent messages where Marcus expressed anxiety about keeping everything separate and ensuring the two worlds don't collide. Finding Vanessa Ruiz proved crucial to understanding the case's full context. When detectives arrived at her Cedar Springs address, they discovered a woman devastated by the revelation that her partner of 8 years had been married to someone else. She was completely shocked, Mendoza recalled. Vanessa believed Marcus was divorced. She knew nothing about Lila's existence, just as Lila had known nothing about hers. Vanessa's cooperation proved essential to the investigation. She provided investigators with photographs, financial documents, and communications that established the timeline of Marcus's deception. More importantly, her testimony revealed Marcus's recent behavioral changes, increased anxiety, paranoia about privacy, and fears about his ex-wife causing problems. Child Protective Services immediately stepped in to safeguard 8-year-old Mateo and 6-year-old Sofia, who had considered Marcus their father figure for most of their lives. The forensic evidence against Marcus was overwhelming. Blood found on his clothing matched Lila's DNA. His fingerprints were on the wrench used in the attack. Most critically, his own statements to police contained multiple contradictions about his whereabouts and activities that evening. Community response to the murder was immediate and profound. Riverside Elementary School organized counseling services for students and staff struggling with the loss of their beloved teacher. Principal Janet Miller described the grief as immeasurable, noting that Lila had touched hundreds of young lives during her career. But the community's shock extended beyond grief to a fundamental questioning of trust and safety. Neighbors who had considered Marcus a friend and reliable contractor now wondered how they'd missed the signs of his deception. The revelation that someone they'd known for years had been capable of such systematic lying, and ultimately violence, challenged their assumptions about the people around them. It makes you realize how little we really know about anyone, neighbor Patricia Walsh told local media. If Marcus could fool his own wife for 10 years, what does that say about our ability to recognize dangerous people? The investigation moved swiftly through the legal system. Within 6 weeks of Lila's murder, prosecutors had assembled a comprehensive case combining physical evidence, digital forensics, and witness testimony. The district attorney's office characterized it as one of the most clear-cut domestic homicide cases in recent memory. Marcus's arrest and arraignment drew significant media attention, partly due to the shocking nature of his double life but also because of the community's love for Lila. Support groups formed to help residents process the tragedy, while advocacy organizations used the case to educate the public about recognizing signs of domestic deception. Detective Mendoza's investigation had provided not just justice for Lila, but crucial lessons for anyone navigating the complex dynamics of trust in intimate relationships. The trial of Marcus Holloway began 6 months after Lila's murder, drawing packed courtrooms and extensive media coverage. District Attorney Rebecca Chin presented a methodical case that left little doubt about Marcus's guilt. This wasn't a crime of passion, Chin told the jury during opening statements. This was the calculated act of a man whose house of lies was collapsing, and who chose murder over accountability. The prosecution's evidence was devastating. Crime scene photos showed the brutal nature of the attack. Digital forensics revealed Marcus's desperate attempts to delete communications with Vanessa in the hours following Lila's death. Most damaging were the financial records proving 8 years of systematic deception. Marcus's defense team attempted to argue temporary insanity, claiming their client had suffered a psychological break when confronted with his double life. But the premeditated nature of his lies, combined with his attempts to cover up evidence after the murder, undermined any claims of diminished capacity. The testimony of Vanessa Ruiz proved particularly powerful. Taking the stand with visible reluctance, Vanessa described a man she believed was her devoted partner and the father figure to her children. Her shock at learning about Marcus's marriage to Lila was genuine and heartbreaking. When prosecutors asked if Marcus had ever shown signs of violence, her answer was unequivocal: never. That's what makes this so terrifying. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder. Judge Patricia Coleman sentenced Marcus to life in prison without the possibility of parole, calling his actions a betrayal of the most fundamental human trust. The conviction brought little comfort to those whose lives had been shattered. Vanessa Ruiz faced the overwhelming challenge of explaining to 8-year-old Mateo and 6-year-old Sofia why the man they'd considered their father was never coming home. Child psychologists worked with the family to process the trauma of losing their father figure to such horrific circumstances. The community's healing proved equally complex. Riverside Elementary established the Lila Garza Memorial Fund, providing resources for students facing family crises. The school also implemented new programs teaching children about healthy relationships and recognizing warning signs of domestic instability. Local churches and community centers organized support groups for residents struggling to process how someone they trusted could have maintained such an elaborate deception. The conversations often centered on fundamental questions about trust, intuition, and personal safety. "We learned that evil can wear a familiar face," said community organizer Maria Santos. "But we also learned that supporting each other through tragedy can make us stronger." The case became a cautionary tale studied by law enforcement agencies and domestic violence prevention organizations across Texas. Training programs now use Marcus's systematic deception as an example of how emotional abuse can escalate to deadly violence when control is threatened. What do you think should happen to people who live double lives like Marcus did? Should the legal system treat deception as a warning sign of potential violence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 3 years after Lila Garza's murder, the small Texas community has transformed its approach to recognizing and preventing domestic deception. The tragedy that shattered their sense of security ultimately became a catalyst for positive change that continues to protect families today. Detective Raul Mendoza's investigation methodology has been adopted by law enforcement agencies across the state. His emphasis on digital forensics and financial analysis in domestic cases has helped solve dozens of similar investigations. More importantly, his approach to interviewing secondary victims, like Vanessa and her children, has become a model for treating family members with dignity while gathering crucial evidence. The Garza case taught us that modern investigations require looking beyond the obvious, Mendoza explained during a recent training conference. Financial patterns often reveal relationship dynamics that victims themselves don't fully understand. The community implemented several lasting changes that serve as a blueprint for other towns. The Early Warning Network connects local banks, schools, and healthcare providers to identify patterns of potential abuse. When multiple institutions notice concerning behaviors from the same individual, they can coordinate responses while maintaining privacy protections. Financial literacy programs now teach couples about joint account management, credit monitoring, and recognizing signs of hidden financial activity. These workshops have helped dozens of families identify problematic patterns before they escalate. The Lila Garza Foundation provides free counseling and legal support for individuals discovering deception in their relationships. Since its establishment, the foundation has assisted over 200 families navigate complex situations involving hidden finances, secret relationships, and emotional manipulation. So what are the key lessons that could protect you and your loved ones? Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Lila noticed inconsistencies for months before taking action. If your partner's explanations consistently seem inadequate, investigate further rather than dismissing your concerns. Maintain financial transparency in your relationship. Joint accounts shouldn't have unexplained transactions. Regular financial discussions can reveal problems before they become crises. Consider periodic reviews of all accounts, credit reports, and major expenses. Recognize warning signs of systematic deception. Sudden changes in communication patterns, increased secrecy about work or social activities, defensive reactions to routine questions, and unexplained financial discrepancies. Know when to seek professional help. If confronting your partner about suspicious behavior results in anger, threats, or escalating conflict, contact domestic violence resources immediately. The National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-7233 provides confidential support 24/7. Document everything. Keep records of concerning behaviors, financial irregularities, and troubling conversations. This information can be crucial for law enforcement, legal proceedings, or personal safety planning. Build support networks before you need them. Maintain relationships with friends, family, and community resources who can provide assistance during relationship crises. The psychological impact of Marcus's deception extended far beyond his immediate victims. Community members learned that charm and reliability in public settings don't guarantee honesty in private relationships. This awareness has led to more open conversations about relationship red flags and mutual support among neighbors. Most importantly, Lila's story reminds us that seeking truth, even when it's painful, is always preferable to living with dangerous lies. Her courage in confronting Marcus, despite the tragic outcome, provided the evidence needed to protect future victims and ensure justice. The community that once trusted too easily now understands that healthy skepticism and verified transparency form the foundation of genuine safety in relationships. Lila Garza's story doesn't end with her tragic death. In classrooms across Texas, teachers still reference her dedication to student welfare. The memorial fund bearing her name has provided crisis support to hundreds of families. Her courage in confronting painful truths, even knowing the risks, continues inspiring others to seek honesty in their relationships. But this case teaches us something profound about the cost of living in shadows. Marcus Holloway's decade of deception required enormous energy. Every conversation demanded careful calculation. Every family gathering meant managing multiple lies. Every financial transaction risked exposure. The mental toll of maintaining two separate realities ultimately consumed him, transforming a community pillar into a desperate man capable of murder. The victims of his choices extend far beyond Lila. Vanessa Ruiz lost her partner and financial stability. 8-year-old Mateo and 6-year-old Sofia lost their father figure. An entire community lost their sense of security. The ripple effects of systematic deception destroy far more than the immediate relationship. Yet within this tragedy lies hope. Communities can learn to recognize warning signs. Individuals can trust their instincts when something feels wrong. Support systems can provide safety nets for those discovering painful truths. Most importantly, we can choose transparency over deception, even when honesty feels uncomfortable. Lila's final gift to us isn't just awareness of danger. It's understanding that authentic relationships require constant honesty, mutual respect, and the courage to address problems before they become catastrophic. Detective Mendoza often says that every case teaches something valuable about human nature. This investigation revealed how charm can mask manipulation, how normalcy can hide chaos, and how the people closest to us sometimes present the greatest risks. But it also demonstrated the power of truth to eventually overcome even the most elaborate lies. If this story impacted you, please like this video and share it. These stories need to be told. Subscribe to True Crime Dossier for more cases that teach us about human nature and how to protect ourselves. Remember, the person sleeping next to you should never be a stranger. In relationships, mysteries belong in stories, not in your daily life. Trust wisely. Question bravely. Live authentically. Because sometimes, the truth you avoid could be the truth that saves your life.